So good afternoon, friends. Good afternoon, principals, teachers, colleagues. We also have a special delegation of people from Mumbai. We thought this was going to be a city affair, and we're so pleased that we have a contingent of 6 people? 6 people from Aran Poddar, Mumbai. So we're really grateful and really pleased that they're here, apart from all the localites here. Thank you. Thank you for making time to come here. Some of you have made a lot of time, some of you have made a few hours time, but I think you've made the right decision, even if I say so. And why it's the right decision, you'll find out, I think, in the course of this evening and afternoon. The Teacher Foundation is now into its teens. We are slowly going to be completing 13 years. In June, we will be turning 13. We started in 2002. And we have worked with over 42,000 teachers in these past nearly 13 years, with both teachers as well as head teachers. In this past 1 year itself, we worked with 8,000 teachers, which is quite a lot, both from the government sector as well as with private schools. This coming year, we're planning to work with 10,000 teachers. So that's a huge leap, in a sense. 10,000 teachers from the private school sector, apart from the 2,000 to 3,000 teachers that we regularly work with, government school teachers. So what do? Our vision statement says we strive to make schools enabling environments for students by empowering educators to become energetic, effective, reflective practitioners and lifelong learners. That's our aim. In a nutshell, what we do is we offer learning opportunities, school improvement solutions for schools, for head teachers, for teachers. And we offer short one day, 2-day training programs, as well as highly customized 1 to 2 year long interventions and solutions for both heads as well as for schools in general, as well as for teachers. This past year, we have actually initiated and piloted 3 new programs. 2 new programs last year and 1 new program this very month. Last year, we initiated 2 programs for 2 ends of the spectrum. Teachers or people who are just beginning to get into teaching as a profession. We ran a 1,000-hour program called the New Teacher, which was specifically for people who want to become teachers. And it involved 600-700 hours of face-to-face training and 300 hours of internship. The other end of the spectrum, we trained senior level teachers to become coaches. We ran a program called Coaching for School Success, where we did a 150-hour intensive program for senior level teachers to become mentors and coaches in their schools. So that's 2 ends of the spectrum. This month, we've just launched an online certified teacher training, teachers certification course called Teach Now, in collaboration with an organization called Teach Now, based in the United States. And in fact, successful candidates who complete this online certification course can then get a teaching license in the US if they pass 2 exams, 2 praxis exams. So that's a little bit about the Teacher Foundation. But schools today, and that's what you're here for, schools today are seen as the sunrise industry. And as in India, we are all aspiring towards becoming a knowledge economy. But as a country, even if I state it bluntly, we are in dire straits if we do not change the way we run our schools, and especially if we do not change the way we relate to and interact with students. So that's why we are here today. There is something, and one important thing I want to say about the Teacher Foundation, incidentally, is that there's something I've said over and over again, but I reiterate that there are very, very few organizations that actually, like the Teacher Foundation, that place educators, the adults in the school system at the heart of what we do. We have no other ulterior motive. We strive towards helping and enabling every teacher and every head to become more inspiring in their respective jobs. So with that, we have no other motive, and that's why you're here, I hope. So in that regard, when the recent suicide of a 15-year-old schoolgirl happened, a grade 10 student happened in a city school, from a city school, it was deeply upsetting for us. It was a jolt to all the work that we do in helping schools become safer, happier places. That's been an ongoing, enduring commitment for us at the Teacher Foundation to help schools become gentler, safer, sensitive spaces, both for teachers as well as for students. And the trouble is that incidentally, we keep getting jolted with various issues that keep on happening in schools. It's not just this particular thing. There are lots of other things that happen in schools that jolt us. And we're not immune to the pain and the frustration that many of you must be feeling also. We feel those emotions in very, very real terms. But it also strengthens our resolve and enduring commitment to alerting and sensitizing and helping school principals and teachers to examine the regular practices, the routine practices that happen in your institutions. Today's School Leaders Collective is the first one for this year. Monila said is the third one in the past 1 year, but this is the first one in 2015. In our schools today, we continue to teach children the way we were taught, which was in the past. And yet we claim that we are preparing our children as citizens for the future. So this becomes a big time warp. We're teaching today the way we were taught in the past, but we're teaching people for the future, young people for the future. And that creates a big time warp and disconnect. And we need to recognize that the sensibilities of young people today are very different from adults, from those of adults. Today, we are discussing this divide that evidently exists between teachers, students, and parents. Schools are indeed at a cultural crossroads. I especially thank all our panelists who have so readily agreed to be part of this collective. It's not easy to come up here to want to speak about something because everybody's talking about it, but nobody wants to talk about it publicly and have a point of view or assert a point of view because it seems as such a sensitive and delicate issue. I'm handing over the mic to Monila, who will be introducing our first panelist and speaker. First of all, each of the panelists will speak individually, and then we will collectively ask them to come here, and we'll have a question and answer session. Okay.
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you, Monila, for the introduction. Thank you, Maya, for inviting me over. We are here this afternoon to discuss schools at a cultural crossroad. I must be honest, I am at a crossroad myself right now as to how exactly I could put forth my views on this very hot and very sensitive topic. I can feel the intense gaze of all my colleagues, my fellow principals, as to how exactly or what exactly I would be saying. But I would like to start by saying this. All of us, heads of schools, principals, at least most of us, are parents first. And most often, when we face situations at work, we operate from this parent's instinct. It's not easy being the principal or the head of the institution. Most of the time, we are always in a sort of a catch-22 situation, caught between the devil and the deep sea. Certain values, guidelines, principles that we personally wish to follow is something that we have to weigh against the guidelines set in the institution. Sometimes a very personal value system I follow at home is against a professional value system. And there are a lot of expectations. If all goes well, everything is good, the principal is highly appreciated. Well done, thumbs up for the principal. If at all an error in judgment, and mind you, we are humans too, then the entire responsibility, the blame for that event or incident lies plainly on the principal. There are many other people involved in the system. However, it's only the principal who takes the blame. And whoever said running a school was a cushy job. Well, coming a little more specific to the instance that Maya just referred, about the unfortunate incident of a suicide by a teenager. I would probably think that this act of committing a suicide was more an act of desperation, more an act of helplessness, more than a weakness. As reported in the newspaper, and what probably we hear from our interactions, the child was pulled up by the principal, reprimanded in front of her mother, and probably out of humiliation, she committed an act of suicide. Well, we actually do not know much more than that. We can only speculate. Do we actually know the kind of relationship she shared with her friends, relationship with her parents, with her teachers, her principal? We really don't know much of this. Even with her building friends, neighbors, probably there could have been a lot of issues. And the principal reprimanding her probably was only the last straw on the camel's back. There's much more that we should know. There must have been a breakdown in communication, and that's what would have led to this incident. But then moving forward, how this incident could have been avoided? Now, what if these kind of situations are something that we face? How are we to overcome this? I'm sure many principals here will agree that they have faced these situations probably on a day-to-day basis in different ways. And whatever you've done till now is the best that you could have done. But is it right? That's the question. Is it the right way of dealing with these situations? To share my perspective on this, the shift of culture in adolescence, it's time that we in the institution begin to look at them differently. You know, the other day I was in a discussion with a group of friends, and somewhere the world wars and the human life were being compared to. They're drawing a parallel between that. The World War I, World War II, I think the World War I was fought in the period of 1914 to 1919. I think if teachers of history are here can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, that's World War I. And World War II somewhere between 1939 to 45 and around that. And both of these had very significant impact on the world. If you draw a parallel of that to our human life, 1914 to 1919, World War I, the ages 14 to 19, there is a crisis. Teenage. 1939 to 1945, the Second World War, somewhere, midlife crisis. Both have an impact. You see, there is a parallel there. Right now, probably we are facing the World War I. Our teenagers, somewhere between the ages of 14 and 19. We have to strengthen our communication channels with our teenagers. As Maya said, what we've been experienced, what we've been taught in the past, or what we have experienced as students, and somewhere down the line, we are doing the same to the next generation as well, being the kind of educators that we are. We have to have an open channel for communication with our teenagers. We have to have the tag removed that we are an authority. They should remove the fear of authority of the school, the principal, the head of the institution. Somewhere remove from the student's mind that we are trying to make them perfect. They have to be perfectionists in whatever they do. Ideally, that's how the mindset in most schools are, that we have to bring them out as perfect individuals. So that thought somewhere should be removed. I think we should understand that this age of the teenagers is an age where they feel shame, they're hurt, they're understanding themselves, sexual awakening, infatuation, attraction. I guess if all this is happening, they are normal teenagers, and we should be happy that all this is happening to them. Very often we don't give them appropriate information. We just state a rule. No walking down the corridor. That's it. Why not walking down the corridor? What is the purpose? Then there is more understanding with the teenagers rather than they would break a rule to find out what exactly would happen if I walk down the corridor. So give appropriate information, why certain rules are made, why are they being formed. Small gestures, small words said at the right time makes a lot of difference. And I speak out of my own experience. A simple word of appreciation, even to the most naughtiest of children, at the right time and meant rightly, I think it makes a lot of difference. Having a professional counselor at school is a better option than having a teacher or a principal act as a counselor. Very often we tell the parents also, I've counseled him, my teachers have spoken, we have counseled the child. When we say counsel the child, who has counseled the child? Is it done in a professional way? Is the child really free and open to speak with the principal or the teacher concerned? So having a professional counselor pays a lot in situations like this. Involve parents at most issues of behavior. They are important stakeholders in our institution. And I strongly personally believe that parents must be made part and parcel of every decision taken for their children in the school. Personally, at every parent interaction, I begin by inviting parents to be partners with us. And I tell them there is no blame game here. It is not that we are telling the parents are at fault, and neither should the parents tell that the school is to be blamed. So right in the beginning of any interaction, I openly invite them to be partners and tell them together, jointly, we can achieve the best for your children, as well as we can bring about some solution to issues which come up with their kids. We never take, or we should never blame the parents singly to say, all because of you, or this is the way you have brought up the kids, and that is why today he or she is like this. Above all, I guess, patience pays in the end. We should have a lot and lots and lots of patience. Should never overreact to situations. Be patient. I think that is the way schools now should begin to think. I'm sure most schools are. I know most schools are. But I think it is better that many more schools join this way of looking at how to deal with our teenagers. Two aspects I wanted to touch upon. One was communication, which I just shared. The other aspect is also of disciplining. All this said and done in our interaction right now, it somewhere feels that, what about disciplining? Should we or should we not discipline a child? If all this is going to happen, if a teacher is going to say, or a principal is going to say something about a child's behavior, and an action like this happens, then that's the end of it. There is no more scope for any kind of a disciplining action at schools. I guess not. I think we have to lay the laws down properly. And we have to make clear what exactly is the outcome of these laws. Where there is an individual, no problem, life goes on well. We can take our own call on matters. Where there are two people together, then a mutual understanding we can arrive at. Three or more, definitely we need to put a law in place, guidelines in place to ensure things go on smoothly. Likewise, at schools, when we have hundreds of children coming from different cultural backgrounds, what seems good for one may not be for the other. In our own personal backgrounds, a greeting in the form of a hug is welcome. But in another culture, that is not seen well. Saying that much, we cannot expect it to happen or be acceptable norm for everyone to say, it's okay, his culture allows him to do it. We have to have a common rule regulation, at least in public areas. So laying down certain standards for discipline is very important. When we talk about communication with our teenagers, very often we also shut them up somewhere. If you can recall, and if you probably remember, at any argument that happens probably at school or between the teacher and the student, the first thing we would tell them is keep quiet. First, keep quiet. You don't talk, you just keep quiet. First, keep quiet. We do that. Somewhere ascertaining that I'm the boss, I'm the adult here, just keep quiet. Listen to me first, and then we'll listen to you. That's sending a wrong signal that that's the way to be. We have to allow our children to express. They have to open up, even if he's raising his voice, listen to him first before we can lay down any kind of punishment or even come to a conclusion as what could have happened. A friend of mine, I met up last month, and he was telling me about the advancement of technology, which we all know, of course, in the US. And this digital divide, the kind of staying connected yet disconnected. He says in the US, and of course it's here likewise in India as well, that technology has seeped in everywhere. And one rare thing that happened in the US sometime was there was a power outage. Rarely happens there. And they were not prepared for it. And eventually his laptop ran out of power, battery, and he couldn't charge it, so he had nothing to do. He hadn't charged his mobile overnight, so he couldn't use his phone. No power means no television, so he didn't know what to do to pass time. He thought he'd go and visit a friend, but he couldn't drive out because he had an electric doorway. The garage was electric driven, so there was no power again, so he couldn't open it up. He thought he'll make himself something to drink, something to eat, no power. He saw his wife sitting in the kitchen and he said, okay, let me talk to her for some time. He spent about 2-3 hours and he said, she's not a bad person, after all. Connected yet disconnected. We all stay together, children together, parents together, still disconnected. Facebook, the internet is the only way we still communicate. What we see as a cartoon in some of the Chinese or the Japanese pictures, which we see all of them around a table sitting and working on their mobile, is something a reality now even in India. So we have to learn to communicate with our children, even as parents, even as heads of institutions. Coming to a disciplining aspect, we can't set the standards of discipline the way we were when we were students. Times are changing, and we have to evolve with this change. Greeting now has taken a different form. From a simple hi from a distance to a shake hand, to a shrug, a shoulder hug, and now slowly it's just a warm hug around, and again greeting with a kiss is now something which is beginning to be seen everywhere around. I guess we have to define what is appropriate in our campus. Well, all these forms may be acceptable all the way, all around the world, but in a public area, in a society that we live in, I guess we have to define what is appropriate, what is inappropriate display of affection. Kissing, long embraces of a very personal nature. We have to define what are the risk-taking behavior of our students, what a violent behavior of our students. Now, I begin to observe children at the drop of a hat get very angry. Even for a very small reason, they have to get back, not just verbally, but physically, without realizing what could be the, the dangers involved there with such an action. Bullying is another form taking on, and somewhere we need to set rules for bullying as well. We should not tolerate it absolutely at schools. We have to send a strong signal that bullying is not acceptable, and also for the victim that there is help around and they can approach. That has to be enforced at schools. I think we should evolve with a proper code of conduct, taking the views and interactions with our teenagers. We could set limits, we could set guidelines in various fields or various areas, taking the views of these children as well. And probably make it very clear as well what are the steps of punishment to follow. A step-by-step indication. Maybe we start with an oral warning, then a written warning, a warning with parents, probably detention, maybe denial of participation in some program, event, activity. Then the final could be recommending for suspension. But I think we need to lay down these laws very clearly and be very impartial and ensure that it is uniformly applied for everyone who crosses their limits. We have to make parents a part and parcel of this culture. And above all, I think we should give our students enough time to correct themselves. If we are going to be open to our students, if we are going to involve them in our interactions, if we are going to listen to them, the problem is we don't listen to our teenagers. If we are really going to listen to them and observe them, they are nothing but mini adults. They have the same feelings, they have the same thoughts. It's just that we have age on our side, we are a little older to them, and probably that's what we can use to our advantage. But given, allow them, and they would do much better than what we are doing. So I think we need to gear up ourselves for this cultural shift that we see nowadays. We got to let go some of those misconceptions that we carry from our past. We've got to ensure that we have a proper channel of communication with our teenagers. I'm sure this world will be a better place for them and for all of us to live in. Well, I stop here at this and then probably take it forward later. Thank you.